Now, it is a privilege and pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this year's Alumni College, Jane Close Conoley. Jane is a graduate of CNR and a member of the class of 1969, along with her twin sister, Joan. Jane served as University of California, Riverside's interim chancellor from December 2012 to August 2013, and is, at the moment, the Dean of the University of California, Santa Barbara's Gervitz School of Education, a position she has held since 2006. However, on July 1st, she will become the 7th president of California State University, Long Beach, and will be the first woman to assume the position in that university's 65-year history. Jane would probably be the first to tell you that her education at the College of New Rochelle was the first in a series of Wisdom for Life experiences, and her education here allowed her to thrive in a variety of teaching positions, all of which convinced her to pursue a PhD in psychology, which she earned at the University of Texas in Austin. She taught at universities in Syracuse, New York, Dallas, Texas, and Lincoln, Nebraska. In 1996, she returned to Texas to become the only female dean at Texas A&M University. Jane and her husband, Conoley, agreed early on that they would take turns relocating as career opportunities became available to them. Their special relationship enabled her to be a trailblazer in education and also a devoted mother and grandmother to 3 children and 5 grandchildren. Along the way, Jane has published myriad books and articles and served as a senior editor for the Encyclopedia of Psychology. She is a fellow of the American Psychological Association and the Association for Psychological Science, as well as a member of the American Educational Research Association and the Society for the Study of School Psychology. The College of New Rochelle is proud to be a part of Jane's journey. Please join me in congratulating the next UCLB president and extending a warm welcome to Jane Close Conoley.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It sounded like the class of '69 back there, so way to go. It, of course, is my great honor to get a chance to talk with you. It's a joyful opportunity. I got to see many of you last night at class of '69 dinner. Special treat, of course, is that I'm here with my sister. Where is she? A twin, Joan. She's waving like that, but she's right over there. And my cousin, Beatrice Close-Kerr, also an alum. So it's been a family connection, as well as having a chance to talk with all of you. I decided when I was asked to speak that I would try to talk with you not about heavy-duty research, but really what I've learned in my career and how it's reflected back in my understanding of what I learned here. I, like perhaps some of you, but I think Joan and I might be at the top of this curve, had 16 years of Ursuline education, first grade through, grade 16, college. Actually, when I got to the University of Texas at Austin, as you've heard, that's where I went for my doctoral work. It was the first time I had a man in my class. It was the first time, my husband points that out, that I met him there. I had to ask myself, this is a much bigger pool, 50,000 students at the University of Texas at Austin. How would I measure up? And that was one of the first insights I had about the excellence of the education we had here. So what I'm going to talk today is about the gifts that were given, that we actually don't earn, right? That we didn't, we didn't do it to get those gifts, but in fact that advantage us over the years, but also the education about how to maximize those gifts. So, oh wait, I have to change the, there it is. I'm changing here And I'm not changing there. Okay, so there we go. So that was me. Lessons. So the name of my talk will be Lessons from My Ursuline Mothers. And I actually got this thought because of the college Wisdom for Life. This is something that is hard for a lot of people to accept. Most of us think that our happiness is actually affected mainly by our circumstances, but now we have 20 years of really good research that tells us that most of us are born with a certain set point for happiness, just like temperament. Some of us are born, well, everybody in the room happens to be a parent or an aunt or an uncle who knows that kids are different, right? Okay, same family. Temperamental differences, are they extroverts or introverts? Are they aroused easily or are they very calm? That's really rooted in neurobiology. We know that now. That's not to say you can't change, but a lot of our tendency to feel good about ourselves, to have positive energy to get things done, to be optimistic, actually came from us through the genetic lottery. So thank your parents, or look at them very suspiciously if you were not. Also, happiness is affected, but notice it's 10% affected by your circumstances, and that has to do with where you were born. Some countries are happier than other countries, interestingly, and the United States is not at the top of that, so we should work on that. There's other factors that affect happiness, your age, some demographic things, your ethnicity, your gender. There's a lot of research on this. There's also events. A childhood trauma can have an effect on long-term happiness, and so on and so forth. Marital status, occupational status, job security. But notice that's a 10% effect. If I learned anything from my Ursuline mothers, and perhaps you learned the same thing, it was to make the best of every situation. In other words, don't whine, right? No whining. They're whining aloud. And these were the intentional cognitive factors that were really that 40% of the pie up there. And that's about prayer. It's about forgiveness. It's about social action. It's about gratitude. It's about seeing the big picture, relating your life to a bigger plan, God's plan for you. These are all lessons from my Ursuline education that fell into this intentional activity portion of the graph. How do we get cognitive control of how situations are appraised? And I'd also say, but when Joan and I began our journey with the Ursulines, they lived at the Academy of Mount St. Ursula, the ones that we worked with, in a actually semi-cloistered experience. I'm not sure what you guys do now, but they lived there then. And it was an interesting lesson for life because they showed by their lives. They were certainly happy, energetic, intense, very intense sometimes. They showed by their lives that what we often think about what creates happiness, clothes, cars, jewelry, are not really related to long-term well-being. And that's a very consistent fact across hundreds of studies. They showed that living in a simple way could be a circumstance for happiness, and it didn't require a massive home or jet-setter travel. And that's not to say you're not happy because you have a great home or you get to take a great trip, but that kind of happiness has been shown to be rather fleeting, as a matter of fact. In fact, it's a much different kind of happiness. So I'll remember to do this. So this is not me, although I wish it was. But I found this picture with the girl with the cape because the cape, the Supergirl, is really, like many of us, born on second base, maybe even third base, right? We're born with a certain temperament. You're all here. We know you're all born smart. I had the advantage, as did Joan and my two brothers, of having a very stable and strict religious family. And we know that poverty is a risk factor for well-being, but we also know now that having enough money, and even my family's kind of check existence, is not really a risk factor if the family is connected to something larger, an extended family, and superordinate values. What's bigger than us? We were talking earlier about purpose. That's really a big promoting. That really promotes happiness. So, and for us, through the Ursuline education, certainly we're connected to a religious tradition that provided stability and direction. In addition, we know that a good education is quintessentially the American way to move forward on your health, your civic engagement, your paycheck, your achievement. In fact, the Ursulines gave us both a good education and a connection to superordinate values of religion, of service, and that, of course, in my life, thankfully, has made all the difference. And they were, for 16 years, my alternate mom. And my mother was a great supporter, thank goodness, of the Ursulines. She at one point said, "Where do you learn that stuff?" And I'd always blame the Ursulines, and that would put a stop to the discussion. So the Ursulines really taught me bravery. My mom might have taught me more caution, both very useful. They taught intellectual curiosity. They taught about music, about the world, about art. Very importantly, they taught about forgiveness. They provided the high expectation and high nurturance environment. Those two words are so important, and we often confuse them as parents and as teachers. High expectation and high nurturance environments that we know now is related to children's success, for sure, but also everybody's success. So although Beatrice and Joan and I and my brother, my oldest brother, Richard, were the first in our first generation to go to college, and I must say that my dad had a certain skepticism about return on investment for girls, but he didn't stop. He didn't stop us from going. I did not struggle like so many of my students in Santa Barbara or at Long Beach to kind of, with chaotic families and crushing kind of economic problems just to get a chance to go to college. And in fact, my chance to come here was enabled by a tuition scholarship. So it was the support of alums who came before that made it possible for me to have this fabulous lifelong experience. Also, I would say that in our extended family, we had, as some of you are, I'm an aunt, and some of your uncles, aunts and uncles, who thought we were terrific. They just thought we were terrific kids. And I can look back now and see the importance of the aunt role, the uncle role, the grandma role in communicating that to children. You are terrific. Let the moms and dads do the hard work, so that's good. I've had so many key Ursuline mentors and models and professors here that I dare not start to name them, but they each were so important and continue to be important. I just learned of, Joan told me that we recently lost from our community sister, Mother Winifred, right? And Mother Winifred taught me speech at the Academy of Mount St. Ursula, where she labeled my speech as substandard Bronx dialect. I had to do a lot of work on that. But she was right, and she was right. That's the other thing. And of course, living in the Midwest for 12 years helped too. The other Ursuline wisdom that I learned, again, as a graduate student and as a researcher all these years, is that we're all embedded in a much more complicated and interacting world than we're usually aware of. In other words, it's not just about us. It's not just about us. We're affected by everything around us. So be humble, see the big picture, work at many levels when you're interested in change, but know that personal change is at the center of this. And I think that the religious perspective that I have a personal relationship with God that requires me to meet a high bar for thoughts and behaviors is key to understanding that, but it's not all about me. Only a little bit is really about me. I liked President Huntington's quote earlier where it was about if you change often, you go toward perfection. I'm right on the edge here. Because of, as Rosa was nice to say, because of being in a two-professor family, I've moved several times. And again, the Ursuline instruction to bloom where you're planted, again, stop the whining, has been key. Each place along this way has taught me something about the world and certainly about myself. I learned when I got to Syracuse University, there was much more a feminist than I thought I was. And I can tell the story of that later. I also went to Texas Women's University as a reflection of my commitment to women's education. I learned there, though, that in contrast to my experience at the College of New Rochelle, just because a woman's in charge doesn't mean it's going to be a high nurturance environment. So it kind of helped some of my own gender stereotypes, knowing that it wasn't guaranteed, as I might have thought it would be. So now I'm soon to be at California State University, Long Beach. But I'm going to spend a second to tell you about this experience that I had most recently at the University of California, Riverside. I was asked just to be the interim. I started in appointed in November 2012 and went through August in 2013. I love being Dean of Education. I mean, if I think about purpose, you know, my sister's been the expert master teacher and principal. I never was a certified teacher, but it became very clear to me as a psychologist that the best therapy any child can have is a great education. Doesn't solve everything, but a great education with people who care about that child and promote that child's well-being is the best therapy that can be offered. But when I got to UC Riverside, I found that I loved the role. I liked being responsible and knowing about the buildings and law enforcement and academics and student behavior, finances, fundraising, even athletics. That's a whole other world to think about. And the relationships with the city and the state. And so I discovered that I really liked that range of behavior. But I went back to Santa Barbara, not a bad place to go back to. No whining there. But I had learned something at University of California, Riverside. I had learned what was expected of a UC chancellor. University of California has 10 campuses. That means there are only 10 people in the state who get to be chancellor. And I watched the other chancellors. I was the new kid and I was the interim, so I did a lot more watching than talking. And I did see that my own tendency, which I think is pretty good, but it's my tendency, is to share the room rather than fill it up. I don't like taking credit for things that a team does, even though often the team wouldn't have done it unless I was nudging it along. I realize there's a delicate balance, though, that women in leadership often face. I'm really acutely aware of the rather narrowed behavioral repertoires that women in leadership still face. That when you're shrill rather than just effective, you're narcissistic rather than taking care of yourself. And this research has just been replicated in 2013, so we haven't made tremendous progress there. But I have to say that these unfortunate constraints on gender were actually never part of my education. So I didn't know about that. I didn't know that to be ahead of something was a threatening thing for a woman to do. And what I did learn was humility, deference, tolerance, curiosity, confidence, enthusiasm, all expectations from the Ursulines and professors working in at the College of New Rochelle. And it actually has given me, I think, some buffer from negative appraisals that sometimes accompany women in leadership. Not all, of course. I have certainly, pissed some people off, that's for sure. I couldn't think of a better word at that moment. Yeah, sorry. But I have often been told that I'm not like other women bosses. So this is interesting, that some people, it's easier to make me a special case rather than revise their opinions of women in leadership. So it's very telling that this would happen. But I do think it's the lessons learned here. There were certainly moments in my life where I felt like I hadn't been taught to be assertive enough to demand my way or the highway. But in fact, what I did learn to be was quietly persistent and demanding of self and students, for sure. The teaching, though, that I think from the Ursulines that has given me the best background for leadership positions, however, has been the focus on community. That, again, it's not all about you, it's not all about us, right? it's about the ability to kind of redo yourself when necessary. You know, I can be more assertive. I can fill up the room if I need to. Here I am, okay? I can be demanding. That's possible because the lesson has been that you can be anything. You can do anything. In fact, I had a doctoral mentor, not an Ursuline, who said often to me, you can do anything, you just can't do everything. So focus. So that says something about me. I think this tendency, or this lesson from my Ursuline mothers was be constantly inventive, don't be self-satisfied, you can do everything. So now I begin as my new job. I will be the first woman president at Long Beach in 65-year history, as Rosa mentioned. I will say that there was a press conference when my name was announced, and you'll appreciate this, President Huntington, I'm sure. The press said to me, how will it be different to have a woman in charge? I don't know. You can tell me later, you know. But it shows, again, a kind of stereotyping thing. I do, for full disclosure though, I did discover in my study of the history of Long Beach that there was an African-American woman, June Cooper, who had been a communications professor who for a brief time was the acting president in between two presidents. So actually at the convocation that's coming up, I'm going to be highlighting her daughter and her granddaughter who just graduated from Long Beach summa cum laude, so that's a pretty great thing. So I'm excited about the new role. And these are my students. And you know, consistent with what you just learned about demographic shifts, I live in a state where there's no clear majority of ethnicity, and this is the future. It's also, I live in a state where overwhelmingly poverty is located among children. And so low-income kids that desperately need an education are the majority in California. And I would say would reflect my own family experience, a low-income kid who needed desperately a good college education. So there they are, they're adorable. And, you know, consistent again with the president's message, I realized when I looked at Long Beach State that my core values had become getting more young people a higher education. I've had the joy of being a researcher and a writer, and I've enjoyed that very much, but one more book or one more article is not going to do the trick for the million students who are now deprived of spots in public universities in California. It's still the best path to a middle class, so my energy is really high to be involved with the school that has as its central focus student success. Low-income kids come and for $6,000 get a good education and they graduate. Right now, only 60% of them graduate. So we have to work on getting more of them graduating from there. But this focus on immigrant education, so consistent with the values of the Ursulines over these many years. I have my boss now is Chancellor Henry Yang. He teaches me about leadership using Chinese proverbs all the time. I've accused him of making them up, but he says, no, the Chinese have a 4,000-year history. There's a lot of proverbs. So he says that there are two kinds of emperors. There's the kinds of emperors that build walls, and there's the kind of emperor who works tirelessly to gradually improve the life situation of his subjects. I've thought about this, and I know that probably my core beliefs are toward the latter, that while leaders come in many forms, I think creating an environment that enhances success and well-being for all is exactly the best thing that a leader can do. And there's actually some research in this area, and as I reflected on it, I thought this is the kind of community or the kind of environment that I experienced in connection with Ursuline communities. And you can read these things, but you know, when I think about the Academy of Mount St. Ursula and Our Lady of Mercy Parish, you know, when there was something to do, you know, when the piano had to be moved from the floor up to the dais, the girls did it. That was it. You figure it out. You were autonomous, you had to do it. And being offered lots of opportunity for development, being recognized for success. I love getting those pins. I still have my Servion pin from elementary school. I look at that very nostalgically. And, the feedback, good news and bad news, substandard Bronx dialect, and way to go, here's a scholarship. But things happened. There were logical consequences to investment of effort. Let's see, and the other. Now, all of these things I'm relating to my experience with the Ursulines. If you read a vast number of books about effective organizations, you find these things. This is what you find. If you read just for kind of easy reading, one of Jim Collins's books, Good to Great or Built to Last, you'll find these things about what makes a great organization. And I actually I try to think about at least one of these every day as a leader. What am I doing to promote these goals? And I try to see it not as a problem with an individual, but as a problem with the system that we have embedded that individual in. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I'm just annoyed at the person. And I'd say along with those 8 things, if I've learned something else, it's don't keep score. Don't hold grudges. Always forgive. It's another great lesson from our religious education. I'm not really good with the two-handed thing here. I can see. Come on, go. And also, to be in it for the long haul. That's Nebraska. I love Nebraska. All horizon, Be in it for the long haul. Take the long view. Eternity is a really long time. Most things don't matter in the short run. And keeping that attitude has been very useful. I also think it's important, and perhaps especially for women, to stake out a small number of great challenges, grand challenges, and work on accomplishing them and be willing to take some credit for them. This may look different depending on who you are and where you are, because context really matters. But bravery, especially interpersonal bravery, to speak the truth to power and to all, and certainly to self, I think that's really key. And perhaps this has been easier for me because I was taught very early about transcendent power. There's not much in earthly power that should seem scary to us, even though there's some very scary people on earth. I think now, maybe a little bit like Bilbo Baggins, it's time and I'm ready for the next adventure. There may be dragons along the way, and while I don't have the magic ring of power, I do have the power of an education, 16 years crafted by the Ursulines. And for me, that's made all the difference. Thank you.